Now that we are somewhat removed from the shocking selection of Michael Penix Jr. by the Atlanta Falcons at number 8 in the 2024 NFL Draft, I would like to take a step back. I want to see if there's a more nuanced discussion here to be had. That's because there's a comparison everyone is overlooking right now. I know sports talk at its core is all about the low-hanging fruit, and the low-hanging fruit here are the wild reactions insulting the Atlanta Falcons. We gotta have draft losers. We gotta have that one team doing something so crazy and so stupid that it's all anyone wants to talk about. I get it, but the thing is here, what the Atlanta Falcons did isn't all of that crazy, and it's certainly not as stupid as some out there want you to believe. In fact, if you dig around a little deeper here, there's actually an apt comparison we should be talking about but don't want to talk about. At the 2000 NFL Draft, the New York Jets didn't need a quarterback, but still took one, and that passer also happened to turn 24 before the season began. I'm Cheyenne Hollis, this is the Touchback, and believe it or not, there's actually some precedent here when it comes to the Falcons selecting Michael Penix Jr.
Chad Pennington was truly the Marshall Plan. 4 years, 14,000 yards.
There are so many fascinating similarities between what the Atlanta Falcons did by taking Michael Penix Jr. this year and what we saw with the New York Jets in 2000 when they took Chad Pennington that it's impossible to ignore. Admittedly, it is not 100% like for like. Nothing is in sports, but it's pretty damn close to it. So with that in mind, let's explore why it feels like history is kind of repeating itself. We begin with the players themselves, Michael Penix Jr. and Chad Pennington. For starters, both will be 24 years old entering their rookie seasons. Physically, they are both 6'3" and close to the same weight. Penix and Pennington are more athletic than they get credit for. This isn't to say either one is a scrambler or is going to be known for their rushing prowess, but they're elusive, they can navigate the pocket, and they have a certain amount of athleticism. It must also be said, both do look fairly awkward when running around a football field. It's not quite Bambi on ice or anything like that, but it is far from smooth. As far as passing talent is concerned, Penix has more arm strength, but Pennington was far from a slouch pre-shoulder injury. Then when you look at their senior season statistics, it is uncanny the similarities you have here. Now, it should be noted, Penix plays in a more modern era. That means there's going to be more passing attempts, more completions, and more yards because he's simply throwing the ball a lot more than Pennington did. But here's a comparison of some of their other key metrics during their final year on campus. Penix had a 65.9 completion percentage, Pennington was 67.9. Penix had 36 touchdown passes, Pennington had 37 TD passes. Penix was 7 interceptions, Pennington had 6 interceptions. I mean, come on here, people. If that isn't enough to convince you, we should also look at each one's sort of untraditional career in college. Penix obviously had some injuries and would eventually transfer from Indiana to Washington. Pennington started his freshman year at Marshall, led the team to the Division I AA championship game, was benched and redshirted that second year on campus, before going on to help the Thundering Herd as they made the transition from D1 AA to Division I proper. It's fair to say each one took an unconventional route in college. Then you have both players as they enter the NFL. It's safe to say both Pennington and Penix entered the league with questions about how they would turn out as a professional. There was a general consensus that each player had talent, that had the ability to become a starting quarterback, but they were not surefire top 5 prospects by any means. I don't think anyone would argue that Penix and Pennington have similar player profiles, at least coming out of college, but it's not the only similarity in the situation. We need to look at the teams that took each one, because there are also similarities here as well. The Falcons enter 2024 with a new head coach that is defensive-minded, a quarterback in their mid-30s coming off an Achilles injury, and is generally a franchise desperate to find some sustained success. Sound like any other team out there? Like, say, the 2000 New York Jets? That year saw the defensive Al Groh taking over from Bill Parcells. Vinny Testaverde injured his Achilles in 1999, but the team was entering 2000 with him as starter. And for as long as anyone can remember, all the Jets have wanted was some sort of sustained success. That Testaverde Cousins comp, by the way, is interesting in its own right. So they aren't hugely different as far as age was concerned. Cousins is 35 going on 36 heading into 2024. Testaverde was 36 going on 37 in 2000. Both are seen as good passers, but certainly not upper echelon guys, certainly not in the top 5, top 8 of quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, when you look at Testaverde and Cousins, there's something there, just saying. The difference between the two situations, between Penix and Pennington, I suppose comes down to the NFL draft itself. The Falcons had a sole first-round pick in 2024. In 2000, the Jets had a eye-watering 4 first-rounders thanks to Bill Belichick dipping out after a day in charge and some other notable trades they made. The big talking point against the Falcons is that they shouldn't have wasted their draft capital. That signing Cousins somehow meant they are in a win now mode, that they should do everything in their power to build the team for this season. If that's your argument, fine, but you could also argue the same thing as it relates to the New York Jets in 2000. We know neither team was starting a rookie QB. We knew that neither Pennington or Penix likely had a pathway to the starters gig for at least 1 to 2 seasons. And as far as New York was concerned, even with the 4 first-round picks, taking a quarterback who wasn't going to play for at least a few seasons was not the best path forward as far as getting to the playoffs on a regular basis. The question, I suppose, is why did each one of these franchises take a quarterback when they didn't need to take a quarterback and when they were looking for a more immediate form of success? Unless you're Biff Tannen walking around with Gray's Sports Almanac in your pocket, you don't know the future of sports. Oh wait, that only covered up to like the year 2000. I guess no one knows the future of sports, even Biff Tannen. The point is not that though. The point is this. The Falcons have no clue what their team situation is going to look like in 2026 and beyond. Who knows where this team is going to be drafting? What's more, no one has any idea of the quality of quarterback prospects to come out down the road. Kicking that can down the road, by the way, is not always a great spot to be in. Just look at the Tennessee Titans for proof of that. Penix, for his part, is a known commodity and one they have access to. Maybe you don't like him as a prospect. That's fair enough. I can totally understand the argument against thinking this guy is not going to be an NFL starter. But you and I are not the Atlanta Falcons. If they think Penix can be the guy down the line and they don't know who the next guy will be or if they'll even have access to grabbing that player when he's available, this move makes a hell of a lot of sense. Let's frame it another way though. Would you rather burn the 8th overall selection in this year's NFL draft on a guy like Michael Penix, who you believe in, or would you rather mortgage the future like the Broncos did in trading for Russell Wilson? To me, the answer to this question is fairly obvious, and it's not Russell Wilson. That's really the reality of the situation here. It's a reality a lot of folks don't necessarily want to recognize because we live in an era of immediate gratification. The Green Bay Packers, after all, did not need Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, but that's turned out okay in both accounts. Beyond that, a lot of the criticism levied against the Atlanta Falcons was that they should have traded down or waited until later in the draft to take Michael Penix Jr. Yet no one can actually say if those were viable options, if that was a path that was legitimate for the team to take. Everyone out there, when it comes to the NFL draft, wants to go on and on about how every team should trade down in the draft instead of reaching on a prospect. But that's not how life works. In order to trade down, someone has to want to trade up. There are so many times in any given NFL draft where there isn't a team willing to do that. Maybe the Vikings would have swapped with the Falcons. I mean, that's one possibility, but we don't know if that was actually a real offer on the table. Even then, if you do that, is an extra mid-round pick worth the risk of not getting the player you want? Folks can say no one was taking Michael Penix Jr. until the second round, that he wasn't going to be selected by any other team. And again, you don't know that. That's kind of why we love the NFL draft, right? Like, you don't know what's going to happen. You're sort of hedging your bet. There's a lot of secrecy involved. There's no clear-cut answer. And in the case of the Falcons, that risk did not equal any possible reward in terms of moving down the board or simply waiting until a later round to grab Penix. This isn't to say I agree with the move. I fully understand why people out there are criticizing the Atlanta Falcons for drafting Michael Penix Jr. with the 8th pick. But what I don't comprehend is just dismissing the move as dumb, saying they should have done something else. But if the situation pans out similar to what happened between the New York Jets and Chad Pennington, injuries aside, of course, that's a whole other thing. You can't really blame the team or the quarterback for his injury struggles over the years. But when he was on the field, he was a very, very good passer. And if that situation unfolds in Atlanta, well, I'm sure Falcons and Falcons fans will not mind the draft pick too much. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know a little bit more about how the NFL draft went from 20 dudes in a hotel ballroom smoking cigarettes to an event attended by hundreds of thousands of people, well, the video in the upper right-hand corner of your screen is the place to go. Until next time, I'm Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.
Pennington